Welcome to the Spoiler Alert podcast. And today, myself, Nate, and my co host Dakota are going to be reviewing Steve McQueen's 2011 film, Shame. It stars Michael Fassbender and Carey Mulligan. Shame is a very unique film. It's about sex addiction.
Which you might roll your eyes at, but this is actually a pretty compelling case for it, I feel.
It is. And it paints, rightfully so, based off of the behavior seen in this film. It paints sex as like a true addiction, you know what I mean? I think it does a really honest job of,
well, yeah, it kind of just transplants the whole no, sorry, I mean to
you good,
because there was another film I guess I was going to recommend at the end. It was Abel Ferrara's The Addiction. And it seems so obvious when you watch the movie, but he was the first to ever really do it. He transplants basically the whole addiction process over to vampirism, which sounds cheesy as hell, but it's actually really good. Yeah. And for the most part, I have a few issues with it, but and so this basically does the same thing. It's it's clearly destroying this guy's life, or he's not in a good place. So I mean, because there does seem to be a structure to it. I don't know how to I'm sure they.
Yeah. There's a descent, right? Right. You can have a descent into madness with a bunch of different addictions, with alcoholism, drugs.
Well, no, yeah, see, I don't know the whole 12 steps thing. I just know that what was it? It's in Addiction, the Abel Ferrara film, she talks about there's one big blowout, and I feel like that probably manifests as an OD or something, where you go, oh, and then you sort of have a realization. It's kind of hard to do that with a movie like this where it's sex addiction, but I feel like that was maybe going to the gay club or getting two hookers at once. And
yeah, I was actually watching a couple of supplements about it, a couple of interviews, and Steve McQueen, who's the director, mentioned that the climax of the film is him essentially ODing on sex, because he loses all sense of control to anything else going on in the world. We'll get into it real quick, but first I'd like to ask everyone to hit the like button and subscribe. Check out our podcasts on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, wherever podcasts are found. And then check out our YouTube channel as well. So although it's a podcast, it's also a video show. So, we
might be doing Apple a favor, because Shame is only available on Apple TV right now, but otherwise your only option's Apple TV or owning it physically.
But I think for 2011, looking back, Shame is one of my favorite movies out of that bunch. Hunger was Steve McQueen's first feature film. That's 2008. And that was also starring Michael Fassbender. So Steve McQueen and Michael Fassbender kind of have a really good actor-director relationship.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just looking at Shame, I mean, that first scene, he's bearing it all for this director. So there must be a certain degree of trust, obviously. I mean.
So the scene opens, this character's name is Brandon, lying in his bed. And then we kind of kick into a montage. So some scenes are overlapping here. His sister calls and leaves messages, and he doesn't seem to want to answer for whatever reason. At this point, we're not sure. And he eyes up a girl in the subway, and they kind of eye fuck for a little bit. And then he also calls a prostitute. So all those are kind of overlapping. His sister calls again. He's walking around pissing. He's walking around naked with his dick hanging out.
He bears it all in the first scene. Yeah.
Yep. At this point, it becomes obvious that he's clearly addicted to sex. He's scrolling through porn. He's calling a hooker. It's made obvious what's happening. And this montage makes it all seem like a big routine where it's every day,
I mean, that's
lines
kind of,
go up.
Right. Well, no, that's kind of the thing with the sister. I mean, he's listening to her recordings it's a little later in the film, but while he's literally watching porn. I talked to somebody where their big revelation was I'm literally talking to my mother while I'm watching porn. And this is so deeply wrong that was the epiphany for that person. It's not necessarily that's the line for everybody, but that's where they were okay, this is fucked up. Right. I mean, where it's I'm just having a normal conversation and I'm watching, I mean, so but he's probably past that point. I mean, this is just it establishes pretty quickly that his priorities.
The girl on the train ends up not hooking up with him. Like she kind of
She
runs
becomes
off.
intimidated because it is this really piercing look that he's giving her, which seems to be his go-to method. I mean, it's throughout the film.
Sex addictions, like I'm not sure if I've seen it like laid out plain and simple in a movie.
No, it's
like
always
this.
kind of made into a joke. I think this is the only thing to actually take it serious, and it really does make a compelling case. I mean, I feel like, I mean, yeah, I was surprised by that. Like, it is effective. Because everybody else is just kind of like, well, I mean, everybody likes sex, so it's stupid. But it's like, well, probably everybody likes Coke if they snort a line,
But like everybody likes food, and you have people with eating disorders, like there's definitely still a difference. It really takes it seriously, and I mean, it's probably like a good movie for a lot of people to watch for that reason.
And probably more applicable nowadays. I mean, where everything seems more isolated.
He is like distant from all his relationships, doesn't let anyone get too close. Just wrapping the last thought up, like, yeah, like sex addiction, I haven't seen a more realistic portrayal of it than this movie. Usually, like you mentioned, it's either kind of like made fun of or almost looked like judgingly at. I don't think this is a very judgmental film. I think it's like maybe like more like a wake up call kind of film.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's a really bold decision to make as a director, because you are taking on something that is so like kind of laughed at, and like to try and make that into your sophomore film or whatever. And very clearly from the start, with the soundtrack, try to establish that you're taking this very seriously. I mean, that's kind of a high risk thing, I would think, so.
Mm-hmm. And the overall look of his like apartment and like the lighting there, harsh midday lights through the blinds, that shows that it's just more of a routine and more of an addiction, because you're doing it at all hours,
No, but it does seem like porn in the past 10 years has become defined by like having kind of just bright white light, like, and
yeah.
It's kind of weird that like this film came out in 2011 and kind of almost like predicted that kind of look, this sort of sterilized look. I didn't feel like it worked for Nymphomaniac in 2014, because I felt like Nymphomaniac was a bit of an indictment, but it also sort of relished what it was doing. So it's like it just felt kind of cold and clinical. This one is the only one I felt like it's not.
Yeah, it's preachy. Again, it's not a judgmental film. It's more like it's more so a film that like asks people to ask for help,
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
is what it comes off more to me as far as like the big takeaway.
But what I was gonna say is I do feel like there's a clear kind of color palette where we have this really cold blue, and that's what the movie opens on, is a cold blue. There are scenes of warm light, like and one of them's the threesome sex scene at the end, where it's like that's almost as close as I didn't track the whole movie. I don't know if that perfectly lines up, but I felt like it was kind of what they're going for, like this stark contrast between cold light and warm light. But I might be talking out of my ass.
Well, I definitely see what you mean. And like homemade porn, like a lot of it's like just shot in the middle of the day when there's, a lot of lighting, but it's not the kind of lighting like a movie maker would always want to use in a
it makes
movie about anything else,
which,
Yeah, that's what they're capturing during the day. I think you did a better job explaining of what I was trying to say. But yeah, and then the scenes at night kind of look like a lot of like the night sex scenes that you'll see, where like it's like more amber lighting, warmer lighting.
Yeah. more
akin to like a fire or something, you know what I mean? That is done more in movies, but like it's also a thing in porn, I think.
Actually that helped me out, because maybe that's what he's going for. Maybe that's what he's looking for, is the romantic amber lighting, but the reality is typically cold and distant, and he's not getting what he's chasing, the dragon of intimacy or something through the whole movie. I don't know.
We get an idea of what he's like at his workplace. Like he's very successful. He's got really bougie friends. He's got a lot of money because he's got a really nice apartment in New York. And I'm sure he's blowing a ton of money on fucking porn sites and Like,
yeah, I mean, again, his
crazy
apartment,
shit.
although
Like,
nice, is really kind of minimalistic. One of the only things he has is like a bunch of like vinyl records, which ties in with what he says later. Like he wishes he was a musician in the 60s, and you can probably imagine why he wishes he was a musician in the 60s. There's not a lot in there. It's like he literally just needs his laptop in his bed is kind of the idea that you get, you know.
he's got very bougie coworkers. They're kind of like, I don't even know exactly what they do. I didn't quite pick up on it, but something to where they have a good amount of money and can go to really nice places, and everything in his life should be together. But we find out that it couldn't be further from the truth. Even the conversations are like filmed from almost like a spectator's point of view. You know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah,
don't have like a lot of cross cutting between close-ups. You have just like a lot of
voyeuristic or
you just have
something,
like a
maybe.
lot of long shots that just
Yeah,
play through, because I think basically what it boils down to is, yeah,
yeah.
his inability to connect socially with people. So like conversations don't even matter to him besides the subtext of sex.
Yeah, he
So
does. He says that to his own sister. It's like try to stop talking for once, you know. Like I mean, like because she's all talk, he's all action, and well, I mean, you can see that throughout the film. Like when he goes on to, there's a physical aspect to it, like where he starts running, right? Because
mhm.
that's physical, you know. Like he's, you know, and so yeah, he just feels like talk and language and words are probably just it's all superficial, and the real meat of it is the action.
I think here too, they're actually drinking with David and then a few other girls. But the first time they go out drinking together in this movie, uh, Brandon, Michael Fassbender's character, he's eye fucking one of the girls at the bar,
Yeah.
and she definitely eye fucks back.
Well, no, I mean, like, well, he's doing a bunch of things there. Like, so for one thing is okay, so he tries to make friendly with the friends, but he's not willing to dance with any of her friends because if she sees that, then she's like, okay, well, he's taken. So he's smart enough not to. One of the friends offers, right, and he's like, no, I'm good, you know. So that kind of signals to her that he's in the clear to he's eyeing her and only her. So he's doing a lot of things right. And his boss is just kind of bluster and talk and whatever, and sort of positive vibes and all that. And it doesn't work out on these chicks. And Fassbender, who says like all of 2 words, ultimately wins the day there. But he's been through this with his boss multiple times. So, clearly. So,
So he
but
ends up fucking one of the bar girls in an
yeah,
alley.
like under like I don't know, a bridge or something. So,
And then he comes home and hears the shower going,
oh,
and someone's in his apartment and he doesn't know who. He picks up a baseball bat, and then he kicks the bathroom door in and like screams like, I'll fucking kill you. And turns out it's his sister. And then that's kind of just a scene that's also weird because like she's naked in the shower. So you would usually imagine that like in a brother sister relationship, you'd leave the bathroom. That scene really like clues you in to like what kind of fucked up like past they may have had too, because
right. They're
it's
used to
spoken
seeing each
about.
other naked.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
spoken about throughout. They might be used to seeing each other naked, have like a cycle of disorder and addiction and depression and
Yeah, I
manic
don't. I mean, I imagine something like the
abuse.
butterfly effect, where maybe because she says that we came from a bad place. I don't know if it's like maybe there was child porn. Maybe it was like I don't know. You imagine the worst things, and they tried to crawl out of that. But it's never actually explained. Again, a lot of that ambiguity was frustrating to me the first time I watched it. But I feel like the movie is actually a lot more considerate upon repeat viewings. Like it's not just maybe this happened, maybe that. Like I feel like it's really actually really precise.
Mhm.
Like little things, like I said, like the records. It thinks about. So I don't feel like it's wasting your time, which you might feel with the really long takes and all that. That's being indulgent. I don't feel it is. I think it's. I feel like it's making use of the time
Yeah.
that it takes. So that was my big frustration the first time. Just to be clear. So if you feel that stick with it, is what I'm trying to say. So
Also, like one of the first nights or so, she's on the phone. I think that
yeah,
same night, she's on the phone with what we can assume is her boyfriend or other significant other, just breaking up with her. And she's crying and she's basically staying a while. And her staying a while isn't probably very good for Brandon's mental health.
it's ultimately a shakeup, isn't it? I mean, for him,
Yes. It's
but
a shakeup of his routine because he's such a routine person and she's the opposite of routine, but they're both destructive. He's
yeah,
more like
they're the
a
opposite but
slow.
the same. She's kind of like flung in his face as sort of a mirror of what he is, but in completely the opposite way, but in the same way, you know.
Mhm.
She's more emotional, he's all physical, you know.
Yep.
So yeah.
They're at a fancy place for drinks, and they walk into this place, and the music playing is some of my favorite things. In the context of the movie Shame, if it like the song, some of my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad,
Right,
going to your crutches, going to your addictions
right.
for,
It's all a distraction. Yeah.
Sissy's there to sing, and then Brandon takes David, his boss, along with. Sissy sings New York, New York, and she does it like in the saddest rendition possible. Brandon has at least made financial success and made something of himself in America, like New York, New York. Like, we're here, I'm rich, I'm still young, like good looking, have all this going on, have a great job, but I'm still fucked up. Like,
Well,
and
and he's not that
they
young because
still
I mean,
can't.
she does make a comment about him going gray too. Like, so it's like this isn't totally sustainable, I think, is another sort of pressure of the film. But
They're still like tied together from their past and they're trying to run from it. It's just like a very sad rendition of New York, New York. And Brandon ends up tearing up. A funny clue into their relationship and how a lot of the conversations start is Sissy will do something very sweet or do something that like Brandon likes a lot.
mhm,
And then she'll end the conversation in a fight though.
yeah,
So right after she sings New York, New York, and Brandon is tearing up and feeling like, like a lot of love, a lot of affection for his sister, like a lot of genuine stuff, she immediately starts hitting on his boss.
but I think that's a major point of the film is that, and that's how life goes. Is that you've people that are just out of alignment, right? They're very similar, but it's just the wrong time, and so that might have been a moment for Brandon, but his sister's having her moment where she's falling into her own sort of typical steps and or whatever. And so the song itself, the lyrics, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I suppose what he moved to New York hoping that there would be something would be different, and that maybe that's why it's resonating with him. There'd be all these people and maybe there'd be a connection and all that city, and
Yeah.
there
And
wasn't.
and the idea that he should be happy, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But he's
because
not.
right. I mean, he even says, say, I have an apartment and a job, and she points out how small that really is when you stop and think about it. It's like what's an apartment and a job? What does it really?
Yeah, what does
And
it mean? That's what she said, I think. Yeah.
right, so they're not that far removed, even though he, I think, kind of wants them to be. So,
Yep.
you know,
They're two totally different people with the same traumas.
right. Yeah. So it's such a subtle movie that there's like so much you could probably read into over the course of it. But it's like, but that's why I mean it's worthwhile that way. It's like it's not a time waster. I mean, if you really do watch the movie, I think there's a lot of content to it. It's not a time waster. The slow pace means something.
And that night, his friend, his coworker David, and boss David, and Sissy end up fucking in Brandon's bed. For like a sex addict, he's kind of going through a lot of anger, and then also like probably getting turned on, but a lot of anger.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. I'm like, yeah, I don't even know what's going on in his head. I mean, yeah, he's probably, I don't know.
But
I mean,
but he chooses to probably do his most positive outlet, which is run. So he goes for a run.
right.
And that's like one big tracking shot that looks really nice. And
Yeah.
the way the exposure is, like a lot of like the lights in the city kind of blur behind him. So it's just a very nice looking shot. So this is the point in time I wanted to take a moment to talk about Steve McQueen. Because if you haven't heard about Steve McQueen,
not the actor. Obviously, that was my big key. I'm like, is Steve McQueen still alive when you recommended this to me? I'm like, he's doing movies now? He's like Clint Eastwood?
Different guy. This is Steve McQueen, the director, not Steve McQueen, the actor. He did Hunger, he did Shame, he did 12 Years a Slave, and then he did Widows. So like 2 years after Shame, he would end up making 12 Years a Slave, which won Best Picture. I think it should have won Best Director too, because I think there was kind of an era in the 2010s where long cuts kind of became how someone gets a Best Director Oscar. Even though I do really like the directors that have won based on that. So Alfonso Cuarón really did it back in Children of Men. Gravity, he did it, and it's a very visual film. I get it. But I think in its own way, 12 Years a Slave is very visual as well. And I just like kind of pairing Best Picture with Best Director usually.
I agree. I just feel like the wrong lesson was taken away across the decade. Like we had really great people doing that, but then everybody tried to emulate it and didn't actually fill it with substance is kind of the issue, you know?
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah. So Steve McQueen, he's one of the better directors going. I think more people should like know about him because I mean
he hasn't done anything since Widows either, like which sucks.
I think he'll keep doing stuff. Like I think he's too good to go away for too long. Back up to the story. Brandon's boss leaves his apartment that he, was just fucking with his sister. Brandon comes back from his run, changes the sheets. He comes to work the next day and his boss mentions that there's a bunch of porn on his hard drive at work. So he's not being too careful with where he's watching porn.
Well, I think the bigger issue there is that he gets one of his friends fired, basically. I mean, so he's sort of embedded now, at least because his boss is paying to assist her. I think maybe that buys him some points, but his friend across from him takes the fall for his dirty hard drive. So he's an intern, technically. It does seem like they have kind of a buddy relationship. Now that guy's life is fucked. I mean, well, not completely, but at least he has to go find another job because of Brandon's. So yeah, he suffers a fallout of that. It also seems like I could be reading into it, but like the intern kind of almost knows that Brandon's a pervert because like Brandon makes some joke about banging the dude's wife, and he's like, "Not cool, man," because he probably knows that Brandon half means that shit, given the contents of his hard drive. So I don't know, but yeah, somebody else takes the fall for his proclivities.
He walks home and he sees in this hotel that kind of like faces a harbor, this couple fucking against the window. And he also and it's a cool shot because that night you also see like a more normal, like a couple that's not having sex.
I didn't notice that.
Obviously, like intimate together, and then there's like I think another family just eating at a dinner table. So you have like the different photos into people's lives. Like it just looks. It's a cool looking shot, but he immediately gets, wants to do something like that. Like, cause he sees something and he's like, why can't I do it? I want to do it.
Right.
He had kind of been flirting with a coworker named Marianne. So he ends up taking her on a date. They have like a dinner, mentions a bump on his head where, where it kind of seems like a lie because we have clues that they have some kind of abusive past where they were abused or taken advantage of and whatnot. So the excuse he gives is that like his brother was roughhousing and like would like throw him against the ceiling. But I feel like it was probably more malicious than that.
I mean, in any case, it kind of gives him something to talk about. Like she knows an intimate secret about him, and then something that nobody else knows, and then she can like latch onto that. It's kind of probably the sort of sexual dynamics or whatever, but no, I didn't think about like the reality of it might be that he was physically probably abused wherever the fuck they came from. It's never specified where they came from, but
I think that can be a good thing because then people can put their different paths in it and it becomes more relatable,
right?
And it becomes less judgmental that way too, because like I feel like sometimes if you say someone's past, you could be like, oh, well, that's a false equivalence. And then you wouldn't feel so bad for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if like you became a sex addict because your father was physically abusive or something, someone would be like, well, my dad was abusive, but I'm not a sex addict. And then they wouldn't be and then they'd be more judgmental. But if you leave like the mystery, you let the audience put basically whatever would make them a sex addict, you know what I mean, into the
Yeah, no,
place
yeah,
there.
that might be the best move, I mean,
Yeah.
it does enough of the legwork in other areas to fill that in, without being specific,
Yeah.
so like, I mean, it doesn't feel like it lacks substance. I guess what I'm trying to say.
I think it's later that night that Sissy walks in on Brandon jerking off in the bathroom.
Yeah.
He gets angry about that, so they kind of have a fight, and then she leaves for now.
Well, she calls him a weirdo, but she feels bad about it. She tells him she's sorry, but he's running the water, so he pretends he can't hear her.
And then he cleans the house of his magazines and porn tapes and a lot of like her stuff too, and also like a big bowl of chili or something. So he gets rid of like a lot of garbage bags, because again, like I think like doing something physical like is like an outlet, and I feel like yeah, he like maybe that's kind of what's going in there too as well, almost like an OCD thing.
Well,
And
yeah, there's
then
been a lot building to that scene where it's like there's this movie I think I watched in like fucking theaters. It's like a Christian movie called like Fireproof, and that's the big thing where the dude he takes his laptop full of porn and he like throws it into like some giant dumpster, and like he's like, I'm not gonna watch porn anymore. Like I think that's what Brandon is doing, and that came out before this movie, but like yeah, like it's the big no more porn, fuck computers, kind of thing. And yeah, and I think he just expects it all to snap into place with Marianne. He's hoping it's all just gonna work out for him.
yeah,
Um,
Brandon and Marianne start hooking up in that same hotel that he kind of took a liking to, but she kind of actually genuinely had a good time on the date, like not just like the subtext about sex, but like she actually had a good time. So she kind of
yeah,
wants to actually connect with him, make eye contact, and have more romantic sex. And that seems to like be part of the reason as to why Brandon can't get it up and ends up like having a difficult time. She ends up leaving and she's like, it's not a big deal, yada, yada, yada. He's really angry about himself with it. He invites over another woman that same night, and then they end up having very less connected sex, but he can have sex. And
well, like you said, it connects to the earlier scene where somebody's banging in front of the whole city, and he wanted to emulate that, So
then the next scene, Brandon and Sissy, this is another long take, but it's like all dialogue. Brandon and Sissy have an argument watching TV.
he says she's too much about talk, and he's all kind of action. He's like, why don't you shut up for a second and just, do something, basically.
And he calls her a burden and things like that. And then so this is like the big thing, and this is like the big fight, and he tells her to move out, and then he starts his last night out that we see in this movie. This is the point in the story or in the video here that I just want to talk about. Fassbender, really great actor. I think he's one of the better ones that continuously is active. If you don't like watch movies like this, you may recognize him as Magneto and the new X-Men like saga, which he does a good job with. I like a couple of
Not
those
great
movies,
material.
but like a couple of them are okay. He always does a good job anyway.
Yeah.
And then he was also in Inglorious Bastards. He was in 12 Years a Slave. He was nominated for an Oscar for that one. He was in Hunger, like a bunch of other Steve McQueen films. So he's just been around. He's a really good actor. And this is like the night that he basically overdoses on sex. It starts with him, and a lot of this is intercut as well, where like one like plot line kind of scene starts, and then another one starts, and then another one starts, and they all climax at the same time. So that's like, so
crazy.
Yeah, and the way it sounds, it has a similar an effect on the audience where like you have like three climaxes at once,
Right.
and then in the context of what this movie is, maybe that means something else. But there's few ways to look at this movie. Definitely, he fingers this girl in a bar and like hits on her. He's also like doing it like right in front of her boyfriend,
Well,
picking
I
a
mean,
fight.
maybe she gets off on that, right? Because she approaches him. There's like almost no dialogue, and I think it's just her way of showing off, like, see, other men want me to her boyfriend, or
Yeah,
something.
or something
And then
like that.
it goes a little further than what she was anticipating,
Yes, definitely. And then her boyfriend ends up punching him in the parking lot or out just outside the club, wherever they were, outside the bar. And then he goes to a gay club.
He gets rejected from the nightclub, like, which I
Right.
don't know how strict their standards are, but I mean,
Well, they said not today, buddy. And I think that kind of seems like maybe he's
frequents that place regularly.
Yeah, maybe he frequents that place and has like upset people in the past or something, or maybe he's just got like the punch mark on his face, so they don't want to have someone in that's been in a fight already tonight.
Like 5 minutes before. Yeah, maybe that's it. So
yeah, they're too far away to really like have like good eye contact, but kind of have like nonverbal cues from this guy like smoking a cigarette outside the gay club. They go inside and he ends up getting a blowjob. It's kind of like all just like filmed as like, he's overdosing, like he's spiraling, he's like out of control.
Yeah, again, it's like a physical thing. Like he doesn't really seem to much care about it. It's sort of novel, but it's just really, it's the physical. If you can't get it at the nightclub, he'll get it over at the gay club. But it doesn't really seem to matter. So
he ends up having a threesome with two hookers right after that, so he's spiraling even further. And
probably where the NC-17 comes in, because it's fairly graphic. But
fairly graphic. Usually dicks will do that too. So
I suppose it opens on so
I don't know if it's fair or not, but usually but very graphic sex scene, and it's all like done with like this very like heartbreaking music, and also
Sissy's dialogue over the whole thing,
and then Sissy's dialogue also. And in that dialogue, it's like a message on the cell phone that he didn't answer when she was calling. She says, "We're not bad people. We just come from a bad place."
Yeah.
And it's very sad. And it's just a very sad sex scene, because just how destructive it actually is.
It's really a hard thing to do, but I think this sex scene makes it look like, if it's even possible, like it's a painful process, like, I mean, it seems to be the point that the movie's trying to make, that it's really a machine-like and robotic and whatever, he's not getting what he wants out of it, so chasing the dragon, whatever, I don't fucking know. But
and then the next morning when he leaves that place, he calls for Sissy and no one's answering, and then he kind of knows what that means, so he runs home.
That was a bit he's on a subway train, I think, and at the start of the film, Sissy is like on the edge, literally. I mean, as far as she was standing on kind of the brink of the, what would you call that, the railway,
the yellow line or whatever.
Yeah, and so I think that starts, and then the sub halts all of a sudden or whatever, and like and because he wasn't able to get a hold of her, he starts to panic, like, somebody's obviously hurled themselves in front of the tracks, and then he starts to think like, oh shit, so he rushes back to his apartment or whatever, because he's thinking maybe that was Sissy. That's what I think that was about, where he's like, oh shit, I think he knows it's not Sissy, but his somewhere in the back of his mind is like, Sissy might have done something because he can't get a hold of her, because she is dramatic, so
that's a good point. He runs home and finds that she's slashed her wrists in the bathroom. That seems like just very quiet. It's like it's all silent, but like you see him like screaming and calling the cops, and why did you do this,
Well,
And
she's done it before because I mean the scene with her boss where like he grabs her by the wrist and he's like, what was that? And she's like, I was just bored as a kid, and he's like, you must have been really bored, So she's done it before, obviously.
yeah, and in the hospital room we see that. So we see like all her past marks, and
Yeah.
it seems like this movie kind of ends in a cyclical way where like there actually isn't really too much of a resolution because
Yeah, no,
he's
wait,
still,
obviously all of this has happened before. It's just a big
yeah, because it's
circle.
all happened before, and like and the way the movie ends.
Is where it starts. I mean,
Well, right. Okay, so away from the hospital, he has like this scene where he breaks down crying, just like in the rain. And then
which is on some place on the docks where he fucked in front of with the hooker. Clear. I
yeah,
mean, you can see so, but
and the movie actually ends like probably a day later, where right where we start, where I fucking the girl on the train, and it's the same girl, and she seems more willing to play along with it this time. And then the movie ends. So he's still an addict. He OD'd, but like he's still like it's implied that he's probably getting pulled right back into it. And
well, I tried.
I think so.
Weirdly enough, it's just normally you're the more optimistic one. I'd say it's ending it on the note he might stop, he might continue on, and it ends on the perfect place in that way. In all likelihood, people typically don't just, but
It would at least be a slow process.
Right. Well, because you saw that with Marianne, right? I mean, earlier where he just expected it all to stop once he threw out all his porn, he's ready to commit because she's clearly her idea of a relationship is commitment, and it didn't work out. So, but at least there's hope in that final scene, I guess is what I read into. I don't know. I mean, it's ambiguous. It's a lot of the movie is deeply ambiguous. How much hope you have for him, realistically, I don't know. But he has a chance at the end of the film, an opportunity to do something different.
And for place in society, like we were saying, it's probably one of the like most honest like sex addiction movies there is. Like we've brought up Nymphomaniac, we've brought up some other ones, but this one seems like brutally honest, but also not judgmental, which is a hard line to
walk. Yeah.
To walk.
I don't know what to say about that other than that, like, this is probably the only thing that comes to mind where it's like it does walk that line pretty well. Other things are too afraid to cast any degree of judgment, and so they indulge it too much, I feel like, and then other things are perhaps too judgmental, So like, I feel like this is a line, like, I mean, this is the only film that comes to mind that does it well, and actually makes a really compelling case. So
yeah, I think so as well. And then as far as recommendations, I'd like to just recommend Hunger. Hunger is really good. It's another Fassbender McQueen film. I'd recommend 12 Years a Slave. Same thing. It's a McQueen movie. What are some of your recommendations, Dakota?
The Addiction, Chris Watkins in that movie for like 5 whole minutes. Requiem for a Dream, Darren Aronofsky. I mean, just addiction kind of films, I guess. They're both really great films, I feel but those would be the two that come to my mind immediately. So
out of 5 stars, Dakota, what are you going to give Shane?
I would give it a 5. Legitimately, it's become one of my favorite movies, I think, at least of the past 10 years. So and that was your recommendation. So I mean, I think it there have been a lot of movies that have tried to do what it does, but they're not as committed to the concept. Cold Light, or like I said, The Girlfriend Experience, a lot of things. This is really the only one to really truly think about it and execute it properly. So for that reason, especially because it's become so definitive of the past 10 years, and being the only one that's executed it properly, 5 stars. So
nice. I also give Shame 5 stars, and I believe it would be as time has gone by, it's probably my favorite movie from 2011. Like you mentioned, it resonates more from this past decade than a lot of other movies. So we both give it 5 stars. That's about all I have for today. Please again hit the like button, subscribe, follow us on Spotify, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Apple, follow us wherever podcasts are found.
Right.
We have an Instagram and a Twitter now. And my name is Nate.
My name's Dakota.
And have a good day, everybody.